And we're now getting some breaking news. This is regarding the India-European Union trade deal. We're learning that the United States goes ballistic over this trade deal. US has claimed that European Union is funding war against themselves. US has said that they've put 25% tariff for buying Russian oil on India. And remember, the big announcement over the trade pact between the India and European Union, which is being called the mother of all deal. The announcement is expected today in the afternoon. And amid that, the US is fuming. US has claimed that European Union is funding war against themselves by making this deal with India. And they've also said that they've already put 25% tariff for buying Russian oil on India. And now with this deal that European Union is going to do with India, they are funding war against themselves. This is what the United States claims.
The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices.
And my colleague Rohit Sharma is now joining us with more details on this. Rohit, it seems like the US is not very keen and happy on the trade deal between India and European Union, with such statements coming to the fore from United States, which claim that with this deal, the European Union is funding war against themselves.
Well, this was a comment made by Secretary Bessent on a Sunday show on ABC, and he was talking about other topics too. But then when he was asked about, the war in Russia, he kind of obviously alluded to the fact that, look, the United States has prioritized the war in Russia and Ukraine to the extent that they've put these additional tariffs on India so that India could, help the Russians come to table and negotiate a deal. But on the other hand, Europeans have not helped their cause. They talk a big game, but the EU, on the other hand, has essentially not done any of that and is going ahead and signing a deal with India. And in a way, as Secretary Bessent said, European countries are financing this war by buying this refined Russian oil products from India, which again India imports from Russia. So I think there is some sense of dissatisfaction in the U.S. about the way European Union is acting, especially when it comes to getting a resolution to the war in Ukraine and Russia. And I think Secretary Bessent obviously wanted to make sure that people do understand that U.S. is doing everything in its power to make sure that they could end this war. But on the contrary, we'll see, and as is expected, the EU and India will today announce a trade deal framework. We probably would not be signing a deal, is what we've learned, but we're announcing a framework about this deal, and it's definitely getting noticed here in Washington, D.C.
Rohit, do stay with us. Let's once again listen into what U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said on the India-EU trade deal.
The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India.
Rohit Sharma continues to stay with us. Rohit, with this trade deal between India and European Union, can this also impact the bilateral ties between India and United States? Can the ties go downhill from here?
Well, one would expect the United States and India to obviously operate, in their own terms. Yes, the Americans obviously introduced a new variable when they talked about the Russian oil and imposing those 25% additional tariffs on India. But I think at some point, and this could be one of those things that you look at Secretary Bessent and what he said in the last couple of days, it is possible that they might look at it and be like, look, why should we be penalizing India for a war that, again, in Bessent's own words, is getting financed by the Europeans themselves? They could possibly be looking at that. But again, it all depends with, I think, President Trump's inner circle if they want to do it or not. But as of this time, as we're talking about it, everybody's excited about this deal with the European Union. As I said, I think people are obviously noticing what's going on over in India. It's being called as the mother of all deals, and it's something that I think the world is looking at to what kind of deal this is, or trade framework that will be getting announced. We have learned that India has been successful to keep the agriculture bit out of it, and that could possibly be a prototype that the Americans could possibly agree on, by understanding that India is obviously diversifying its investments and exports rather, and so is the European Union, and America should not be left behind, and that could nudge the administration to finally, get everything together to have a deal with India. And the first step, obviously, would be, as you suggested, could be removing those punitive 25% tariffs on India.
Right. Rohit, and what about the bilateral ties between the US and the European Union, which are already strained due to the Greenland issue, and with this trade deal and with such statements from US Secretary? What's next for the US and EU ties?
Well, they're not as amazing as we've always known them to. I mean, we've all talked about in the last 10, 15 days about, the changing world order that we're witnessing. We never thought that people would be questioning the relationship, EU and the US and NATO and President Trump going to Switzerland and saying those things. So I don't think that EU and India signing a deal would do any damage. But I do think it will nudge the administration to get moving along on the India deal. Also, it sends a big signal to the world that EU is prioritizing stuff with India. And we've seen statements from European Union leaders, who were talking about a world-based order and having a new allies and building new relationships. And I think that is something that has also, in a different way, encouraged by President Trump and his idea of the world and sphere of influence and whatnot. So I really don't think that it would be bad in terms of EU and the US. I think US would make their own decision, but it definitely will get noticed. And I'm pretty sure once the deal is announced, we'll get few reactions from important people here in Washington, D.C.
All right, Rohit, thank you so much for all those details. We'll keep coming back to you for more updates on this. Let's once again listen into what US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said.
The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with India. The U.S. has made much bigger sacrifices than the Europeans have. We have put 25% tariffs on India for buying Russian oil. Guess what happened last week? The Europeans signed a trade deal with